Esther Miller is a pioneering hydrotherapist who understands the extraordinary power of water to heal. She knows that for most of us there's a place in the world where we feel safe. But what is it that drove a woman with a phobia for water to base her life's work in a swimming pool? It began years back when she was a physiotherapy student in Pretoria, and a life-changing case crossed her path.
There was a beautiful pool in the training hospital in Pretoria. I was assigned a little patient who was about 3 years at that stage and had been severely abused and raped. And I had to help her get walking again. And I bonded with this child terribly. She wasn't able to do anything that we would conventionally do with a child in therapy because she couldn't weight bear. And I think so much of the trauma had been imprinted in her little brain that certain positions and movements were just never going to happen. I just thought, that's it. This is a child I'm going to put in the pool with me because she's got no memory of water. She's never really been exposed to it in this kind of environment. I'd like to see what she's going to do with it. And we got her walking. It was just that moment of watching this child snap out of that trauma into something that was so new and so different and so safe that she could liberate herself. That did it for me. I wanted to work with water.
Esther comes from White River in the former Eastern Transvaal. She grew up in a conservative Afrikaans-speaking environment with a German father and Afrikaans mother who were both committed Baptists.
I was in an Afrikaans school and I was a little girl who spoke English at home, and we didn't go to the right church. I never felt like I belonged, ever. There was a lot of instability, there was a lot of financial pressure. We ended up immigrating to America when I was 12. And that was a huge upheaval, literally uprooting life. In the process of leaving, I felt very, very, very fragmented. But I can tell you in hindsight, it was the best thing that happened for me, and found myself for the first time. I came back to South Africa 18 months later, a different child.
So when did you know what you wanted to be in your life?
I went to an open day at the physiotherapy school, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I knew. I was 15 and I made the decision that's what I wanted to be. And because resources were limited, I knew that I had to make it happen myself. I studied really hard. So a big chunk of my teenager life was work. I don't think I really lived as a teenager normally would. I felt very responsible from a very young age.
Esther paid her way through university and got hands-on experience working at a private physiotherapy practice. Her undergraduate studies had included a module in hydrotherapy, and she knew that this was the field that she wanted to explore.
So I moved down to Cape Town the minute I got my degree and went to work for the military as a civilian. They had a magnificent rehabilitation pool. And together with a friend of mine, we started up the rehabilitation unit at the military hospital. It was the first hospice in a military environment. At that stage, we were still seeing quite a lot of the sort of border war kind of scenario. They came with physical disabilities. And for them, the water is such a foreign environment. It peels the layers of and the veneer of control away. So it was a very strong rehabilitation medium for us to use.
Esther set up her first aquatherapy practice with a friend, but after a few years they parted ways. Then she created a facility on her own, offering swimming lessons, aquatherapy and water-based exercise. This too was not to last.
Sadly, the property was sold to a developer, and in spite of us pleading with them to give us a bit of time to relocate, it didn't happen. And within a month, that property was demolished. It was one of those horrible, horrible experiences. It was my life, and it was gone. I, at that stage, had already met my now husband, who's a very solid force in my life. And we very calmly sat down one day and he said, we have to think about alternatives. How can we make this work? And within a week, Mediclinic Group, and particularly the one in Cape Town, contacted me. In fact, the hospital manager contacted me and said, we have a small hydrotherapy unit and we would like you to see if you could come and use it. How they heard of me, I have no idea. And I went to go and have a look at it, and it was a tiny, tiny little pool that was too deep for me to stand in, and I'm quite tall, and too small for me to even reach my arms out. But I knew that I could make it work.
Physiotherapist Esther Miller had been approached by Mediclinic in Cape Town to take over a small pool at their hospital and set up a hydrotherapy practice. But Esther came up with a much bigger plan. It was risky and her reputation was at stake.
I took a huge leap of faith and I said, let me design it for you. You fund it and make it the only hospital in the Mediclinic Group that has a hydrotherapy facility. And I will run a proper rehabilitation and aquatic facility for you. We were limited by the space that we had allotted to us, but I just knew that I needed to make that pool as big as I could. And doing that made the costs go up. I didn't think they would do it because it cost a lot of money to do.
The most important bit is this bit here, is that wall.
Esther was the only one who knew how to create the state-of-the-art facility that she felt would best serve her patients. It had never been done before in such an environment, and Esther had to be on site, making every decision and watching every move. It needed to be perfect.
Esther did get her hands dirty, bending down, looking at the surface of the water and, making sure that there's no sharp edges around the corners and that the steps are the right height. It becomes a question of not only safety but also thinking ahead and think of a patient who has a stroke. One part of your body is completely paralyzed.
The more I designed and the bigger I made it, the more resistance I got in terms of how much the budget was limited to. And there was a very strong limit to that. The more I realized that if they can go that far, I can maybe stretch them just that little bit longer, a little bit further to try and get this facility to be the ultimate facility.
So you convinced them to do this, and then you had to make it happen. So how did you stretch them? What did you say?
I will put in whatever you want me to put in. I'll put in the extra money. I believe in this so much that I will cover what we run over the budget. I have such a connection with this pool. I call it the pool of love. It is such a special environment. When I normally take the first few steps into the water, there's a moment. And that happens for every single person who goes into that pool. I think it is that primal connection. Like I can let go here. It's safe enough to be whoever you really are. The beauty of this environment is that we can take in so many different kinds of people.
Since 2007, when Esther opened her pool, so many people have benefited. She works with cancer patients, with trauma rehabilitation, chronic conditions like arthritis, and even teaches simple daily exercise.
I thought I was just coming into a normal orthopedic practice. I'm going to just do a couple of years and get experience. But actually it was a journey for me as well. You don't just treat an injury, you embark on a journey with patients. So the type of patient that we see there are just so much more complex, and they normally come with a story. They normally come with a lot of hurt. They normally come with a lot of pain and trauma. And yes, you've got to walk that road with them. So you not only look at the patient holistically, but you have to give more of yourself. And working with Esther meant that I had someone who I could always look up to and sort of think, well, that's how much passion she's got for her patients, and that's how much effort she puts into them. And it was so inspiring, and now I'm at 6 years later, and I'm still working with her.
Glenn Millen became a quadriplegic after a freak accident in 2005. For years now, he's been working with Esther and receiving treatment at the pool.
So I just got out of the hospital terrified of anything because everything was just arm movements then. I didn't have any range of thing for my neck. She just said to me, listen, there's so much that I can do for you. Once I was in the water, it's a complete state of pure relaxation. For me, it's a place of safety because I can't hurt myself. And I was absolutely terrified the first time I went in.
There's great risk in treating patients like Glenn, but Esther made sure that she understood the situation fully and was totally prepared for his needs.
She can relate to how dangerous things were with me initially, and I had to get out of the pool quickly and not faint. But she was well informed enough to know about all these things.
One can't work on someone's body and not connect with their soul and their mind. When people are physically disarmed, stuff comes out, they talk. Patient is not a psychological one, but we do have to deal with a certain amount of that. And that's part of what I really enjoyed, because that's where the healing aspect comes through.
The types of things that Esther, really wants out of her patients, out of her treating the person as a whole, is that she wants to get you to a place that she can see potential and possibility, and she's got a vision of where the person can go with their recovery.
That's it, John. En ons stap in die swembad vandag. Ag nee, sit vir jou kyk.
Luca Himan is a feisty little boy with cerebral palsy who Esther's been treating for some time now. At first he was hesitant, but now he's a completely different child in the water.
They have a beautiful relationship. They laugh and they talk, and he tells her stories and she tells him stories, and they communicate and they play games, and they have little secrets and secret surprises at the end of the session, and they just love each other. It gives him freedom, and I think it gives him ego as well, because suddenly he feels like he can move, and his body doesn't feel dragged down, and it doesn't feel so difficult. So he has freedom of movement, and that gives him joy, and I think the tightness of his muscles are also relieved in the water. So he feels invincible, and he feels strong and able, and he loves it.
Idiot! Nee. Idiot. Idiot. Sien daar, 1, soos 'n dolfyn, 2, 3, groot splash, go. That's it. Baie mooi. Sien jy baby? Sien jy baby? Just checking.
From a professional point of view, I'm living my dream. And I think the reason for it is because the people who enter my world are so amazing, and they are actually healing themselves. I'm just the channel, the facilitator.
aquatherapist Esther Miller took a leap of faith and created a unique state-of-the-art aquatherapy practice and healing pool. But while she was doing it, there was another, more private leap that was taking place. A big decision at the deepest level.
When we decided that we were going to get married, a big issue for him was that I wasn't Jewish. And I found it very difficult initially to get my head around that, because I'd walked away from formal structured religion. We discussed it, and I decided that if I'm going to marry this man, I wanted this family and my children and myself to have an identity and to fit in and to live a certain way and have a certain lifestyle that I believed was true.
It took years for Esther to complete the process. Her conversion required study and a total change of lifestyle and home environment.
Becoming Jewish in an Orthodox way is a big challenge. It is a complete shift in the way that you live. But I was so convinced that I wanted to do this. It felt right. I was at home. I felt comfortable with it.
So did you initially cover your hair?
I did. I had to cover my hair. So it was a complete shift for me. I had to learn how to wear dresses and I had to cover my hair all the time.
And how does it sit for you now? What is your practice and ritual now?
I don't have to do those things anymore to be Jewish. I am Jewish.
For Esther, her wedding day was a deeply meaningful and ritualized move into her new spiritual home. And it was made all the more significant because Saul was at her side.
And it was such a special day because for me, you know, there's always such a hype about weddings. And girls dream about dresses, and this day just wasn't about that. It really was about the fact that on your wedding day in the Jewish faith, the gates of heaven open up and you have an absolute carte blanche to go and make your wishes known.
And what was your wish list?
There were many wishes for my family.
Through her conversion, Esther embraced a whole new family and set of customs. And she also found a strong circle of friends who she could turn to if she needed support.
It takes a great amount of courage and insistence with yourself that is what has to be done on a Friday, that you should bake a challah and that you should run a kosher home. These are all things that have to be learned, and these are the simple things. There are hundreds of different things relating to the religion, and that is why for somebody to actually convert, before they even start the process, when they actually approach the rabbi or whoever is their first link into Judaism, there are many, many aspects that they have to go through, and they turned away many, many times to go back and think about it. Is this really what you want to do? And for Esther, this was a great challenge, a great personal challenge for her.
Okay, let's roll your sleeve up.
Okay.
You're such a good challah maker, hey? Mm-hmm. All right.
Shabbat is a very special time for all of us. And for me, it has very deep spiritual connections and energy. It is laden with energy. So for us, particularly in preparation, every Friday we make challah. We make the bread together. And my daughter's in training. My son helps along. And we make this bread because it is a symbol of our connection to Hashem and to God, and how He provided for us and still continues to do so. So for me, it's not negotiable. I bake every Friday.
Who's this little bit that Mommy puts in the oven first for?
Priest.
Correct. It's for the priest. And then this goes into the oven. Amen.
Amen.
And we just bake it separately.
It's amazing when you think of thousands and thousands and thousands of years of tradition.
And so many Jewish women are still doing it, you know, which is awesome.
And they get it
It's to be equal on all the sides, huh? So you know what's actually a good idea? Can I show you something? You got to give it the love, Zach. Look here. Look at me. Look at me. Give it the love. Squeeze it a little bit. And then roll it. There you go. Here it comes.
There's such a rhythm to being Jewish that's beautiful. I feel completely comfortable with the way that I live my Judaism. As the mother of the household, I hold it together and I keep the spiritual energy alive.
Names have always been significant in the Jewish faith, and Esther's birth name is the same as the famous Jewish queen who at great risk to herself stood up for what she believed. It's a legacy that Esther Miller holds dear.
Esther is a beautiful name, and it's a queen of such distinction. And if you look at Esther, Esther has this beautiful, she carries herself so beautifully, and she has that air about her. She could be Queen Esther.
My name is Esther. It was given to me by my parents. As a child, I hated the name. And all of a sudden, I went into an environment where it was the queen. She was the queen. And it felt like I had come full circle. I started falling in love with my name.
Each week, Esther is given the chance to connect with her spiritual leap. She takes time out from her working life to be with the family, to reflect on home and tradition and Jewishness. And perhaps also on the extraordinary journey that she's taken so far, and the way that she continues to bring hope and healing to others.
I never doubt that I have this purpose to fulfill, whether it be to be a healer, or a Jewish mother, or a wife. There's a big picture that's planned. It is part of actually taking those steps to a bigger, better, more evolved state of faith, of spiritual well-being.